Hi, and welcome to my channel. This is part 2 of a 2-part series where I discuss trees with a master arborist. In today's video, he'll be sharing his general recommendations for tree installation, how to care for a new tree, and even what size tree you should purchase. When would you say the best time to plant a tree is?
Yeah, in Texas, fall.
Fall.
Hands down. Earth Day, Arbor Day used to fall in April. And so, they would have these big planting events in Texas in late April, right when it's 95 degrees.
Yes.
And these planting events were just turning into genocidal events.
Yeah.
And so they moved it in Texas to November, where it should be. So now Texas Arbor Day is in November because it's a much more appropriate time to plant. It gives the tree an opportunity to root into the soil it's been planted in before it hits its most stressful time, which here is going to be summer. That summer heat, that summer drought is the most stressful event any of your plants are going to go through in Texas typically. And so giving them as much time as they can to root into the soil, to establish, to get used to where they are before that stress hits is huge. So giving them that whole winter of root growth is a big thing. We do plant fruit trees typically in March, just to avoid those freezes. But most trees, you're much better off planting in fall, mid to late October through November. But really any time in winter, you can get away with it. If it's
Okay, I was going to ask.
If it's December, January, you're ready to plant a tree, go for it.
Okay.
I wouldn't say, I have to wait for fall.
Okay.
Especially with the trees on this list.
Okay.
You should have no issues.
So even like right now, you're like, if you want to, you're kind of like, oh, I missed November. It's still winter.
Totally.
Go for it.
Yep.
Okay. I know we've got I don't know when I'm going to air this. I know we've got a freeze coming up. Do you need to kind of watch for that or anything?
With this list, no.
Okay. Okay. No. Perfect. When is the worst time to plant a tree? July,
August.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're really rolling some dice if you're planting in the summer in Texas. I mean,
get a warranty.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
If you're planting in July, get a warranty. If your landscaper knows they can, some trees it would be fine.
Okay.
You get a cedar elm, you plant it in July, it's probably gonna make it.
Gotcha.
But if you're doing a huge planting project, just wait for the right season.
Right. Wait for fall. Save your money and your effort.
Save the tree will thank you. Because being planted is a huge shock. We have something called transplant shock that a lot of trees will see. Just the process of being taken from their pot and put in the ground is very shocking to that tree. It stresses it out in a big way. And so compounding that stress with now being in a new environment, probably more light than they had in the nursery, those compounding stresses can kill the tree.
Gotcha.
You're not gaining anything by planting them early, because in the beginning, the whole goal is to grow roots. Those first 3 years, you want that tree to be rooting in. The foliar growth is not that important.
Gotcha.
It's not going to grow roots in July, August. You're just going to be keeping the root ball alive until things cool down.
That makes sense. Okay. What do you think the ideal size of tree to put in your landscape is? Do you want to spend the money on a 100-gallon tree, or are you better suited to maybe do like a 35-gallon? Like, what's your take on that, or kind of does it depend?
I have the ideal is a 3-inch liner.
Okay.
So the way I personally plant trees for myself is I buy 3-inch liners, which are about $3 each.
Okay.
The trees are about this big.
Okay.
I buy 4 of them.
Okay.
And I plant all 4 in the same spot.
Okay.
And then, it takes minimal water to get them established. And one of those 4 is going to be the best.
Okay.
So you get a little bit of genetic control. Okay. You get a little bit of control for viability of the seed. And then once one of them clearly establishes and is dominant, snip the other 3.
And then you don't have to even pull them up. You can just cut.
Just cut them.
Okay.
Because if some species, it will absorb their roots as well.
Oh.
And so it'll take the roots of those other 3-inch liners, because they're all the same species. They're probably clonal, so they're all related. And so a lot of times they'll absorb the other tree's roots. And starting a tree that small, you will have no root defects. You have no girdling roots. It'll grow a proper taproot, which many trees want to have a deep taproot. But as soon as they're in a container, that taproot hits the bottom of the container and now is permanently damaged.
I see.
And
okay.
so starting with something that small, you are always going to have the best results.
Gotcha.
Most people want a little more instant gratification than that. For that, I recommend 30 gallon. It's going to be, you know, anywhere from 10 to 12 feet tall with the shade trees, smaller with the ornamentals. But that's a great choice if you want a little instant tree. But if you're asking me what I think the best is, start small. And even if it didn't work out, it was one shovel full of dirt and $12.
Yes.
There's no loss.
Right.
The biggest negative there is time.
Gotcha.
But that small tree will always catch up.
Okay.
In the long run to a bigger tree.
What's like the basic care, the starter care for a new transplant?
Right. So, you know, depending how it was planted, if it was planted correctly, and the girdling roots have all been removed, the root flare was exposed, it was planted at the proper height, the beginning care is very simple. You want to just maintain that mulch layer, which is 3 to 4 inches, you know, over the planting hole, and then you want to water. You know, the first 2 weeks, I recommend watering every day. And then beyond that, water 2 to 3 times a week. Ideally 3 times. If it's, you know, a drought tolerant species in the winter, drop that down to 2 times. But in our summers, you're not going to overwater it, hitting it 3 times a week. Okay. And so for the first 2 years, you need to be really consistent with that watering to get it to establish. Okay. And once the tree is established, and my general rule for establishment is if you can grab the tree and shake it and the root ball doesn't move.
I see. Okay.
So if the root ball is firm, the stem is firmly in the ground and it won't shake, your tree is now established.
I see.
And so once you hit that establishment, you can dramatically reduce the water.
Okay.
If you want to grow fast, keep watering.
Gotcha.
But if you want to stop watering as much, you can really dial it back once you've hit establishment.
Gotcha.
The only one I would say you don't want to dial it back with is the Mexican sycamore.
Okay.
I would continue to water at least once a week through there.
Okay.
And then, you know, once we hit drought periods, you know, that's when you want to give established trees water. Once, you know, there's a drought announced, the area's in drought, once a week, every other week, give it a big drink.
Okay.
Just to be sure.
Gotcha.
You know, it's really hard to know sometimes with our native trees if they are drought stressed or not. They're very stoic, and they won't show it all the time. Yeah. So it's always better to just keep them properly watered.
Okay. When you mentioned like watering it daily or watering it 3 times a week, is there like a set amount or time frame, or I know it's like
it depends on the size.
Sure.
So like for 30 gallon, I would say 15 gallons for each event. Okay. It is better to water trees in the evening. Okay. You know, all the trees I planted were like that. And, you know, the first one I planted was a Monterey oak. And it's in probably 7 years, it's 26 feet tall.
Wow. Wow.
And that's not a joke. And I have the photos to back it up.
Yeah.
So there's something crazy about starting them that small that if they do establish, they just go nuts.
Yeah. So patience is key. So starting them small, I mean, you're saving money, you're saving work, but you're also saving, if you're water conscientious and you feel uncomfortable with giving plants 15 gallons of water, then start with the seedling.
Totally.
Yeah. Do it that way. You know, when would you say the general time to prune best time to prune is for most trees?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of variables there. I would say best is probably going to be December, January, November, late fall, early winter. Okay. It's a great time to prune. From a biological standpoint, there's lots of other variables. You know, if you're trying to thin canopy, you know, you want to see where the weight on the canopy is falling and where it's too heavy, you know, you're going to need the leaves. So doing that in the summer may be better. The big thing to avoid with pruning is any oaks you want to avoid pruning between February and July to avoid the spread of oak wilt.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I would say that late fall to winter is the best. Now, again, if you're hunting down deadwood on a deciduous tree, it's a lot harder to see the deadwood in the winter.
Okay.
So that may be pushed to summer. Yeah. Because it's going to be easier to find the dead branches.
Gotcha.
You know, over time you'll develop tree vision and you can see them, but it's still easier and faster to do. when you can see everything easily.
Gotcha.
I mean, I'm a huge DIY guy.
Yeah.
I think, you know, if you feel confident and you want to try trimming your own trees, go for it.
Okay.
Just go slow.
Okay.
Do a little bit of it at a time. Take less than you think. Step back. Look at the tree. Just make sure you're not overdoing it.
Okay.
You know, do the minimal you need to get what your goals are.
Okay.
You know, the more you take is not better.
Okay.
You know, you want to leave as much of the canopy as you can and still achieve whatever you're trying to do, which for most homeowners is get it out of my driveway, get it off my roof, get it out of the sidewalk, get the deadwood, get it out of the street. You know, take minimal you need to accomplish those goals, and then you should be good. But yeah, as soon as you need to climb to do it, call someone else.
All right, your advice is if you have to climb to cut anything, call an arborist.
Yeah, but I mean, you can do an astounding amount with ground tools.
Okay.
You know, if you're, especially in Central Texas, trees aren't that big.
Yeah.
You know, you have a pole saw with extensions and clips with extensions. You can do a tremendous amount of work from the ground.
Gotcha.
You know, I loved groundwork, and I was really, really good at it when I was in production. And I mean, I could, you know, get the whole job done before the climber even got his rope set up sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Just by being good with those pull tools.
Gotcha.
So I'm all for the DIY.
All for the DIY.
Just learn. Don't just go for it.
How about for some of these newer trees? Maybe you're trying to structurally kind of train them in a certain direction. Is there a amount you would not exceed? Like, don't prune more than 25% of the tree?
Yeah, 25% is the general rule.
Okay.
Don't take more than 25%. You should always aim to take way less than that.
Okay.
The 25% is a lot. That's like pushing it.
Yeah, it's like taking a quarter. Okay.
Yeah. And with younger trees, you know, generally I recommend not to get to try and prune as little as possible, except to correct a few defects. Obviously, if any dead shows up, to take that. If the tree gets co-dominant limbs, or branches, so if two branches are trying to be the top of the tree, get rid of one of them, so there's only one top to the tree. But you know, in the beginning, all of those leaves, all that photosynthetic area, you know, are also producing the plant hormones that are needed for root growth. So a lot of the root growth hormones are made in the leaves. So every leaf is making those hormones. So you want to leave every leaf you can, because in the beginning, the canopy is secondary. The rooting is what you're going for. You're trying to grow roots in the beginning. You don't care about the top. It's about the roots.
Yeah.
Most tree companies, for some reason, refuse to do that when they plant the tree. To get rid of those girdling root issues. You know, we do that at planting because otherwise we have to come back and do it. We don't want to come back. Let's do it right then.
Yeah. So, because I did hear you say that you want to make sure that as you establish a tree that's planted well to begin with, and when you say girdling roots, would these be considered these roots that are like circling around it? So you got to cut those.
Right. So as you know, as a tree grows in a pot, you know, it's basically growing in tree jail. It hits the edge. The roots hit the edge of the pot, and then they can only go in a circular motion because that's the only direction they can go.
Yeah.
And so if the tree, especially if the tree's left in the pot too long, those circling roots will get bigger and bigger. And then as the stem of the tree grows and those circling roots are still there, they'll eventually choke the tree and girdle the stem of the tree.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then making sure that you break up the girdling roots, you put it at the right level. Like you don't want to bury it too deep. There needs to be exposed root flare.
Yes. So you want the bottom of the root flare to be about 2 inches above grade.
Okay. Gotcha. And then when you lay that mulch down, you don't want to cover that root flare.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
You want to mulch at least 3 to 4 inches off of that root flare.
Okay. Kind of. So it doesn't need to be like a volcano.
No volcanoes.
To almost be not like a bowl, but
yeah, you want like a flat layer of mulch.
Okay.
Starting about 3 inches out, at least out to the drip line, or at least covering the root ball of the tree. But ideally, you want it out to the drip line of the tree.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
As the climate is changing, unfortunately, our natives are starting to doing as well. You know, we're seeing a shift in the palette, especially after the 2021 freeze. I mean, there were whole genuses that were wiped out. You know, Pittosporum used to be everywhere. They're gone.
Yeah.
They're gone.
Yeah.
You don't see Pittosporum. They were all killed.
Yeah.
So, you know, that really changed the game. And sadly shrunk what is already a very small palette of trees that we have to play with here.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So you want to be adaptable.
Yeah.
And these trees are well adapted to the area. So
adaptable and open. We may have to bring in some non-natives to fill some gaps.
Yeah.
In our landscapes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So thank you so much,
Yeah,
Andrew. I
you're very
really
welcome.
learned a lot, and thank
Good.
you for spending the time with me.
Happy to help.
So if you have any questions, put them in the comment section, and maybe I can get Andrew to help me with a lot of them. If
I'll do my best.
Yeah. All right. And I will make sure Andrew has a great video on watering your tree. He's got a couple of technologies there. I think he likes mainly soaker hoses, but I will make sure I link that to in the description box as well, so you can watch that.